I was in charge, and I am extremely knowledgeable on that domain. The position didn't make much sense for Greece. The transaction was disguised from Greece's partners, and a number of other, and I think the margins didn't really make sense.
Because it was too much dressing of the books.
Absolutely.
So you were leaving a lot of bonus on the table.
Oh yes, when you drop, when I speak about, several hundred million transaction, it's several people around the table leaving several million of personal money. That's absolutely right.
장부를 손질한 그리스는 문제점들을 뒤로 미뤄뒀다. 게다가 그 후로 몇 년 동안 그리스는 흥청망청 돈을 썼다.
Credit was easy, and big global investment banks such as Goldman Sachs were eager to lend to relatively risky places such as Greece, and they were eager to tell their customers that these risks were not very big.
Banks considered Greece almost as safe as Germany. So Greece could borrow on German interest rates, and they were very low indeed.
There was a bubble, a consumption bubble, I would say. Banks were intermediating that. So we had an increase in expenditures way above our means.
Citizens of the world, welcome to Athens.
It has a special twist in Greece because of the Olympic Games. There was a euphoria that led to irresponsibility.
No one was thinking, the money's available, but we're borrowing it, and this is very expensive, and at some stage we're going to have to pay it back. How is that going to work out? Greece, being such a small country, being a small economy and one that wasn't really going anywhere, it was a disastrous mix.
I find it hard to believe that a continent that can figure out, pretty precisely how many centrifuges Iran is running at this moment, enriching plutonium and uranium, couldn't figure out that the Greeks were cooking their books, doing currency transactions with Goldman Sachs. I think they knew. In fact, I know they knew, and they just didn't care.
How do you know they knew?
Because I talked to them. They knew. The Greeks had a constant dialogue with Eurostat. Now, it doesn't mean that they didn't play a few tricks along the way that Eurostat didn't know about, but the Eurostat knew the big ones.
I would put it cynically as follows. For several years, Greek governments pretended that to keep their public finances in order, and their European partners pretended to believe them.
2009년 심판의 날이 왔다. 게오르기오스 파판드레우 정부가 들어섰는데 이들은 부채의 실제 규모나 이를 감추기 위해 어떤 술책이 이용됐는지 몰랐다고 주장했다. 기오르고스 파파 콘스탄티노가 재무장관이었다.
Not until we sat down in the General Accounting Office and sort of slowly stripped the layers of expenditures that were due but not really being recorded or declared. And not until that time did we realize that what we had was a very, very serious problem.
파파 콘스탄티노는 다른 유럽의 재무장관들에게 나쁜 소식을 전했다.
Our deficit for this year is going to be double the one previously projected, in double digits, around 12.5%. This means I showed up and I had to tell them that the deficit was twice as big as they thought, twice as big as the previous government had told them, and 6 times as big as was originally planned.
We felt betrayed, to be fair, because all of a sudden the public deficit that had been reported by the Greek authorities at the time suddenly, ballooned, and then it went, sort of downhill from there on, because there were successive revisions of those numbers on several occasions.
Some creative accounting is used by virtually every self-respecting government that I can think of, right? But here again, the Greeks went a bit beyond the pale.
There could be extensive foreign exchange volatility at the risk of
a decade of frantic overspending has left it roughly 400.
Investors are ignoring Greece at their own risk.
Yeah, I bid 35 for 50, so.
뉴욕부터 런던까지 채권 트레이더들이 그리스 국채를 매각하기 시작했다. 기꺼이 자금을 대며 유로화 지출을 부추겼던 바로 그 기관들이 철수한 것이다.
And in 2009, this whole thing fell apart, and what you're seeing at the moment is this sort of crumbling edifice that was built over the last few decades.
시장에서 더 이상 저리 대출을 해주지 않아 그리스는 지출을 줄여야 했다. 시위대가 거리로 몰려 나왔고 다른 유럽 국가들은 이런 상황에 대비한 계획이 없었다.
I think everybody knew that the construction of the euro was not a finished construction, because when you don't have a real common economic policy and fiscal policy, clearly a common currency theoretically doesn't work.
2010년 유로화 가치는 급격히 떨어졌다. 아일랜드, 포르투갈, 이탈리아가 추락하기 시작했다. 이어서 그리스 경제의 4.5배 규모인 스페인 경제가 위기에 빠졌다.
It became apparent that Greece was not alone, that this was not just a Greek issue, that there were other countries that had similar problems. So what was originally perceived as an isolated problem quickly became a systemic problem for the rest of the Eurozone.
Could this affect the United States? Absolutely. Of course. Our banks would be the obvious conduit for any shock. They lend a lot to Europe, they transact a lot with European banks, and we in the United States have not sufficiently prepared for those difficulties.
The debt crisis and economic chaos could have a dangerous ripple effect around the world. And what's happening in Greece and the
유럽의 위기가 또 다른 미국 은행의 파산으로 이어진다면 이는 재앙이 될 수 있다.
How much of an impact could this have in the US?
2007년 이후로 미국의 5대 은행은 몸집이 더욱 커졌고 지금은 미국 경제의 56%에 해당하는 자금을 관리한다. 2011년 가을, 유럽의 재정 위기가 악화되면서 뉴욕에서 월가 점령 시위가 시작됐다.
I remember sending an email to my boss asking, "Is anybody watching? Does anybody care about this?" What, the protests? No, that was the response, I mean, it just wasn't an issue. They didn't seem to care down on Wall Street.
When I first saw Occupy Wall Street, I was highly skeptical, and I just thought it would be shut down on day one, like I think most people did. And then they had this momentum. And then there was the pepper spray incident. These 3 girls were kettled in the orange netting and sprayed in the face, and that was the moment where I said, I have to get down there, and I have to be involved in this.
People took to the streets to express their anger, but what exactly is their message?
Democracy. What do these people want?
Participate in your democracy.
Occupy Wall Street from the very beginning was being criticized for not really knowing how the system works. And what I realized was, nobody knows how the system works. Even the people in finance don't understand the system.
The yields come down, the prices go up.
From bonds into stock.
Beneath the surface,
their inflation rates are getting out of.
They understand their little corner of the system.
Blockbuster day for the bulls, as with all the details.
S&P seeing its first 3%.
But very few people would come forward and say, I'm an expert on the financial system, I know how everything works.
Still is getting very little publicity,
a company like Genentech.
We are Occupy Wall Street!
The occupiers, they know that the result of this system is not working for them. That's enough.
We are growing!
The system is a huge black box, and they are seeing the output of that black box. A lot of them are college educated, they have enormous student loans, and they don't have a job. And that is the output. Them and all the people around them don't have jobs and are in a huge debt. They don't have the power in fact, to address the system and to question it. And I feel like the occupiers should be appreciated. That in spite of the fact that they don't understand it, they're willing to come out and say, this isn't working. The system isn't working.
Occupy everything! Occupy
워싱턴에서는 다른 싸움이 벌어지고 있다. 한쪽에는 공익을 보호할 책임 있는 12개의 정부 기관이 있고 한쪽에는 로비스트들이 있다. 2010년에 도드 프랭크 금융개혁 법안이 통과된 이후로 양측은 어떤 규정을 수용할지를 두고 사실상 교착 상태에 머물러 있다. 금융업계는 국회의원들에게 로비를 하는데 3억 2천만 달러 이상을 썼고 규제기관은 힘겨운 싸움에 직면해 있다.
Generally speaking, it's not a level playing field. The banks have got vast resources. They have very highly paid inside counsels whose job it is to outwit the regulators. It's a game. And over time, what we've seen is that the winners of this game are usually the banks rather than the regulators.
규정을 만드는 과정은 아주 더뎌서 완성된 것을 찾아보기 힘들 정도다.
I'd like to call this meeting of our advisory committee to order and begin by thanking you all for agreeing to serve on this.
연방예금보험공사에서 규제 담당자들이 일명 망하기엔 너무 큰 은행들에 대해 논의하고 있다. 이들은 금융계의 유력자들과 협력하는데 그중에는 시티그룹의 CEO였던 존 리드, 월가의 특급 변호사인 로진 코헨, 증권거래위원회 의장이었던 윌리엄 도널드슨, 연방준비제도 이사회 의장이었던 폴 볼커가 포함됐고 맞은편에는 복합금융기관 부서 담당자들이 앉아있다. 대형은행의 파산에 대비하는 게 이들의 임무다.
So the scenario is sort of everything but Title II.
Title I plans go
많은 문제가 있다.
non-bank operations.
어떻게 파생상품 계약들을 풀고 고객의 돈을 보호하고 제외 자회사들을 처리하고 재앙을 막을 것인가?
I take the point, but this is a problem for the entire strategy of continuing to have mega banks. Because from a market point of view, surely what you're looking through to how disruptive would that be? What kind of systemic knock-on effects could it create? Isn't it?
I don't know how this ends. We like to think that we live in unique times, but during the 1920s, we had a tremendous amount of financial innovation. And when we had the great crash and we came out of it, we had a series of investigations that led to the securities laws. My hope is that we'll learn the lessons that we learned from 1929. Maybe it'll take longer for us to learn the lessons of 2007 and 2008. Maybe we'll need several crises to get us there.
You got two main business lines, good old commercial banking and capital markets.
어떤 이들은 시간을 되돌리는 게 답이라고 한다. 연방준비제도 이사회 의장이었던 볼커는 대공황 시대에 글라스 스티글법의 초석을 복원하는 규정을 제안했다. 자기 자본 거래와 전통적인 고객 지향적 은행업을 분리하는 것이다.
If they're in the same legal entity.
Well, we aren't going to be instructing the companies what to do. They're going to be telling us how they're going to deal with that issue.
There seems to be no willingness to address the conflict of interest inherent in modern banking, because that would mean essentially pulling apart the two parts of the bank, the proprietary trading and the client-focused businesses, and there is no real energy or traction for dealing with that issue.
And then a year down the road, you have 37 different offsetting trades just to hedge this one stock buy that you made at the beginning.
It makes sense in as much as the rule is supposed to prevent P&L due to prop trading, right? If all you have is a bunch of
뉴욕의 월가 점령 시위대는 볼커 룰이라는 규제책을 검토하는 그룹을 구성했다.
This would be a good question to just straight up ask the SEC.
금융계의 대대적인 로비 후에 이 10페이지짜리 규제 방안에는 300가지 면제 사항과 빠져나갈 구멍들이 덧붙여졌다.
The risk section of the Volcker Rule is really vague, really vague.